Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I, as along with the member for Hammond, stand to support this motion by the member for Dunstan. ANZAC Day is a national day of remembrance in Australia and New Zealand that broadly commemorates all Australians and New Zealanders who served and died in all wars, conflicts and peacekeeping operations, and the contribution and the suffering of those who have served. Observed on the 25th of April every year, ANZAC Day was originally devised to honour the members of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, ANZAC, who served at the Gallipoli campaign, their first engagement since the First World War. ANZAC Day marks the anniversary of the first campaign that led to major casualties for the Australian and New Zealand troops during the First World War. ANZAC commemorations have suited political purposes from 1915, when the first ANZAC Day march was held in London and Australia, which were very much around trying to get more people to sign up for the war in 1916 to 1918. In 1915, Australian and New Zealand soldiers formed part of an Allied expedition that set out to capture the Gallipoli Peninsula in the Ottoman Empire to open the way to the Black Sea for the Allied navies. The objective was to capture the Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire, which was a member of the Central Powers during the Ottoman armies, the war there. The ANZAC forces landed at Gallipoli on the 25th of April, meeting fierce resistance from the Ottoman army, which had been planned as a solid, bold strike to knock out the Ottomans out of the war quickly, became a stalemate, and the campaign dragged on for nearly 8 months. At the end of 1915, the Allied forces were evacuated from both sides, had suffered heavy casualties and endured great hardships. The Allied deaths totalled over 56,000, including 8,709 from Australia and 2,721 from New Zealand. News of the landing of Gallipoli made a profound impact on the Australians and New Zealanders at home, and the 25th of April quickly became the day on which they remembered the sacrifice for those who had died in the war. Though the Gallipoli campaign failed to achieve the military objectives of capturing Constantinople and knocking out the Ottoman Empire out of the war, the actions of the Australian and New Zealand troops during the campaign bequeathed the intangible but powerful legacy. The creation of what became known as the ANZAC legend became an important part of the national identity for both countries. This has shaped the way in which our citizens have viewed both their past and their understanding of the present. The heroism of the soldiers in the failed Gallipoli campaign made their sacrifices iconic. In New Zealand, the memory is often credited with securing the psychological independence of the nation. On the 30th of April 1915, when the first news of the landing reached New Zealand, a half-day holiday was declared and impromptu services were held. The date, 25th of April, was officially named ANZAC Day in 1916. In that year, it was marked by a wide variety of ceremonies and services in Australia, New Zealand and also London. In New Zealand, it was gazetted as a half-day holiday. Over 2,000 people in London, in the city, and also an unnamed London newspaper reportedly dubbed them the Knights of Gallipoli. Marches were held all over Australia. Wounded soldiers from Gallipoli attended the Sydney March in convoys of cars accompanied by nurses. For the remaining years of the war, ANZAC Day was used on occasions for patriotic rallies and recruiting campaigns, and marches of serving members of the AIF were held in most cities. From 1916 onwards, in both Australia and New Zealand, ANZAC memorials were held on or about the 25th of April, mainly organised by returned servicemen and school children in cooperation with the local authorities. Early morning services were solemn, with a more upbeat tone set for honouring returned soldiers during afternoon activities. Australians, as the member for Hammond has indicated, Australian troops did not return to great victory parades at the end of the war. This was partly because their arrival home depended on available shipping, but also because of the influenza epidemic of 1919, which prevented people assembling in large numbers. The 1919 Sydney parade was cancelled as a result, but a public commemorative service was held where participants were required to wear masks and stand there 3 foot apart. With the coming of the Second World War, ANZAC Day became a day in which to commemorate the lives of Australians and New Zealanders which were lost in that war, as well as in substantial wars. The meaning of the day has further broadened to include those killed in all military operations in which the countries have been involved. ANZAC Day was first commemorated at Australian War Memorial in 1942, but due to government orders preventing large public gatherings in case of a Japanese air attack, it was a small affair and was neither a march nor a memorial service. ANZAC Day has been annually commemorated at the Australian War Memorial ever since. In Port Pirie, we have commemorated not only ANZAC Day, but all other engagements by establishing memorials along the whole length of Memorial Drive. We can acknowledge and remember those who made the great sacrifice so that we can enjoy the freedom and lifestyle that we enjoy today. My late brother, served in the 2 terms in Vietnam. My late dad served in the Second World War in Papua New Guinea and the Trail. 4 of my uncles served in the Second World War, and my brother, younger brother, he served some time in the Defence Force, but he sort of didn't continue with it. But my late brother Peter, he spent about 23 years in the Defence Force, serving not only 2 terms, 2 visits to Vietnam, but also as an attaché to Darwin and also into Canberra. And whilst I have that great privilege of my family being in there, I've also did probably about 9 years in the Army Reserve. In that period of time, I was able to learn a lot about myself, but also about other people in particular. I will mention this, during my brief time as the Minister for Veterans Affairs prior to my heart attacks, I thought I understood the everlasting trauma that survivors and their families may have had, but I certainly was not fully aware of some of the invisible to the general public, long-lasting emotions that have been part of those families from many, many years ago. I had the opportunity to listen to people who had lost, the widows who have lost their sons or their fathers or their husbands in a war. No one would listen to them, be able to give them the ear to be able to talk about it. I had the emotional opportunity to have individually some of those mothers, widows in my office, and some of the trauma and the heartbreak stories that they were telling. I didn't have to say anything, but I just sat there and listened. And I also learnt a lot about some of the things that we in our communities and the public don't talk about. Mr. Speaker, I cannot express enough my gratitude to all those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, as I have mentioned earlier, but only for the original sacrifice, but also for the past, and also the current serving AIF people, and also anybody that's in the Defence Force whatsoever. These people who dedicate their services to protect our future generations to come. One of the things, Mr. Speaker, is that we can take it for granted that we have a great lifestyle here in Australia and in the Western world. We have lots of challenges. And I cannot, as I said earlier, I cannot express my gratitude enough to the people who volunteer or enlist in the armed forces, no matter whether the Air Force, the Navy or the Army, or in the associated activities, but also to their families, to their children, their relatives and their friends. I say thank you, because we see lots of challenges in the world today. We are a very fortunate nation. We are a free nation, and we have these people who made the sacrifice not only in Gallipoli, all the wars, to be where we are today. May not have been, we've had invasions on our own soil, but we are an isolated community, but today everything is fine. But again, I cannot express my gratitude to those people that did that, and to the grieving relatives and families of those who did not survive, lest we forget.